this evening is a bit of fun interaction and also learning along with that. So feel free to put anything you're thinking of while the session happens on the chat. I would like to introduce our panelists today. Uh, I would begin with Sanjeev Balan. Thank you, Sanjeev, for taking time this evening. Sanjeev is the AVP for product engineering based out of TAFE with over 25 years of experience in manufacturing engineering domain. He has worked in Rane, Cooper Busman, Nokia, and been in TAFE for many years, establishing new facilities, and an amazing human being and a person, a very, very professional person. Thank you for joining us this afternoon.
Thanks.
We also have Shyam from Satvik Solutions. Shyam is the founding partner for the solutions, which works on machine vision technologies. He's also got 25 years experience in this, and he has a tagline of removing subjectivity from, I think, inspection. So their vision is the vision of the company is how to improve through vision, quality in production and shop floor. I thanks Shyam for joining. I have Jayendra
Thanks, Umar.
called JB from NextFirst. JB is a founder and CEO of NextFirst Engineering. He's a mechanical engineering by training, studied in IIT Bombay and from Stanford in his master's. He's passionate about manufacturing assembly lines and currently working on innovative robotic solutions in warehouse and assembly operations. Thank you, JB, for joining us today. So I want to begin with the most used word of in the last few years is one word like Industry 4.0. So I want to start with Sanjeev to begin. Sanjeev, from your perspective, what is Industry 4.0? The reason this question I want to begin is sometimes we see, and I'm sure many of us will relate in this forum who's attending and panel, get inquiries which runs into pages of RFPs, and there's one line saying, ensure it's Industry 4.0 compliant, or I want it to be Industry 4.0. We have different perceptions of what this, so let's begin the session by understanding what the meaning is. That is Sanjeev.
Thanks, Umar.
Thanks, Sanjeev.
Thanks so much. It's basically it's becoming a myth, Industry 4.0 myth. So I would say that everybody talks about demystifying Industry 4.0, and perceptions are different. In my perception, I would say that basically we all of us in an industry or in discrete or process or whatever may be, we talk about connected machines, connected systems. I would say that beyond connectivity, migrating or a metamorphosis from visibility and more into transparency, predictability, and end of the day, see, mass production is no more there. It's only mass customization. So adaptability is the key. So if we are able to use all these levers, whatever you call it as digital levers, Industry 4.0 levers, technology levers, if we are able to adapt to that mass customization, I would say that that is the key to Industry 4.0. That is, in my perception, that is Industry 4.0. Migration or metamorphosis from a visible state to an adaptive stage.
Thanks, Sanjeev. From visibility to adaptability. I think it's that nice term coined. Now we'll use it in the AI forums more. Thank you for that. And over to Shyam. Shyam.
Yeah, I mean, Industry 4.0 has been the buzzword nowadays in all the automation circles. We received so many RFPs, making systems are Industry 4.0 compliant. At the basic stage, I think the Industry 4.0 is all about, connecting the machines and the shop floor sensors to the computing world via using effective use of the networks. That is only the first part of the Industry 4.0. The next thing is once we connect all these shop floor segments together via networking, what becomes possible is seamless exchange of data which will help the plant personnel to have a effective control on the processes. That's the next promise. And the next, above and all, when you have this huge data that is coming, you have the data analytics kicking in to achieve the objectives like as Alan was mentioning, bringing in the transparency, bringing in the predictability, bringing in visibility. These are the things that would be the natural outcome of the data analytics. I think once implemented, Industry 4.0 would be a journey. It's a journey from connectivity to reach a stage where the factories become very adaptable, transparent, and responsive. So that's my view on the Industry 4.0.
Thanks, Shyam, and over to JB.
First of all, thanks to Anup, AI, Uma for putting this together and then inviting us to be a part of it. I think it's a great way to spend an afternoon, talk about topics that are relevant to the way the industry is evolving. So really appreciate your invitation, Uma, for us to be on the panel. For me, I think before we understand what is Industry 4.0, right, we need to understand why did somebody have to even coin a word like industry? Why did we have to name something that emerged, right? And all of us, I'm guessing in the panel, and people who are attending this are all professionals in this vast area called automation, right? And for those of us, who started our careers 20-25 years ago, automation was, had a few clear attributes to it. It was limited to manufacturing floors. It was something that happened in industry. It was something that was used to produce a lot of something. If people came to us and say automate something that produces 1,000 in a year, or somebody came and said automate something that produces 500 in a month, we would say this is not automation ready. Right? It's kind of how automation was before. And I think this word called automation itself is evolving, is emerging. I mean, I started my career 20 years ago, and I'm having to relearn and unlearn a lot of new things, because I think what's happening today is automation is going from producing a lot of one thing to helping produce a lot of many things. All right. Sanjeev spoke about mass customization, right? So this is one thing that is happening as we speak. The second thing that's happening is automation is moving out of shop floors. All right. Automation is not an industrial word anymore. Very nicely, industrial automation has now become called automation. All right. Automation is leaving the confines of shop floors. It's entering everything from the point of production to the point of distribution to even the point of consumption. I mean, today you can go, you can see, omelet making robots and dosa making robots, becoming popular, right? So automation is leaving the confines of the shop floor and coming all the way to the points of consumption, right? So what's happening because of this is the promise of automation, which originally was supposed to be speed, is now being replaced with flexibility. All right. So automation has to now, all of us as automation professionals have to deliver flexibility, right? People who come and ask us, I mean, Henry Ford told 1 century ago, you can buy any colored car from me as long as it was black, right? So I think today I'm actually talking to a customer who's saying, I want to set up a line to produce 1 million of something. Don't ask me what I'm going to produce, correct? I mean, that's kind of how, the world has changed, right? So words like mass customization, words like flexibility, and all are becoming very, very common, right? So along with this, controls professionals like us have to start writing ladder code. We'll have to start writing. It's very funny that when I write code now to control machines, I actually start by defining data structures. I mean, something that was unheard of in the automation industry, right? I mean, in the automation industry, you go put a coil and start writing code. I mean, now you have to define what data your machine is going to produce, right? So in this context, everything has to produce data and everything has to use data to affect control, right? So to me, Industry 4.0 is this framework, is this Zen mode that all of us have to get into, where decision-backed real-time controls and insights have to be generated, and control systems across the pyramid of the hierarchy of control systems have to use real-time database systems. And to me, that is Industry 4.0.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, JB. We heard about visibility, adaptability. We are hearing about speed versus flexibility, looking at things. So my last wrapping piece on this from an Industry 4.0, I think is two parts to it. I think we always had visibility. because we had HMIs. When we talk visibilities, one is seeing, and we hear about hearing and listening. People say hearing is just hearing, listening is actually knowing what you're doing. So similarly, we always had HMIs. I think we are getting deeper in terms of visibility of understanding. And second, I think taking informed decision making to know. And also, when you take a decision, you can know what the impact of the decision is so that you can make a fresh choice. It's like a closed loop of it. I think that is at a engineering level, I feel. I think at a philosophical level, we have something called neti neti in Sanskrit, which is said when you want to find the ultimate thing, you know what it is not, but you don't know what it is. So I know what Industry 4.0 in my personal belief. It is not machine learning, it is not AI, it is not IoT, but it's something much. I think it's a democratizing piece because for years we have been talking about users wanting to have information. Now it's the marketing hype, which is Plum has brought one thing. At least everybody is talking about it. I think it'll see relevance more. So I believe it's in a way democratizing for what an MES or those kind of systems could not accomplish in terms of mind share and investment. I believe the Industry 4.0 is something the ecosystem will drive. So if we move on from that, I think the theme for this evening is supply chain and quality. And I remember when I was speaking to somebody else, and even this panelist, this one of the questions was, a supply chain is means you're talking about logistics, intra logistics, horizontal, but the context in this session was to see what happens with supply chain and its impact on the shop floor. So what we are going to do is probably look at the elements around the themes we spoke about, and we'll first take quality and then look at how quality leads into supply chain and the associated challenges in that. So over to Sanjeev again. So if you look at quality, Sanjeev, you've put up new plans, and when you put new plans, you would actually figured what happened in the earlier plan. So from concept, it's like you have the first child, you feel some error in parenting. So the second child, you start by saying day one, you know how to parent. So similarly in plants, you would have addressed, quality through some kind of smart automation or whatever initiative. Some thoughts around that, and then we'll leave it to the others who actually implement solutions. So from a user side, some perspective,
Okay.
set the tone.
Okay. Okay. Basically, I would say that, whatever mistakes which we did in the past, we would have corrected in the new plants, whenever you look at green fields or brown fields, or I would rather say some of when we call it as black fields also. So it's a complete transformation which we need to do when we look at past trends and how do we correct that. For example, what we had focused in quality is basically, of course, everybody has the buzzword of zero defect. Now, how do I imbibe it in the traditional way of in-process gauges and things like that? But how do I collect data to understand what is happening to the product, right from the inception of the product? I will talk about that in the quality and supply chain later. But inception of products, how do I cut across? When I say quality, I integrate productivity also with that. How do I cut short my bought out inspection rate? So how do I make sure that the batch, because as I talked about mass customization, it's managing variety now, not numbers. For example, in most of our plants, in our biggest plant, we make around 374 variants on the same conveyor line. So it's a mad race. So now how do I make sure that the right component hits the right stage at the right time? So this is where a lot of data collection, data accuracies, sensors, when you talk about the traditional put to stores, pick to light, all those things comes from the storage space area. I would say supply chain integrated, we call it as internal logistics within the plants. Now, how do I integrate quality in supply chain of the internal quality? Now, there, what we have done so far is bringing in more visibility of how the parts look like, because you have a very volatile labor force right now. And especially in this post-COVID season, getting labor force, training them in the short span of time, within a quality perspective becomes very difficult. So upskilling them with the latest techniques of Industry 4.0 becomes a buzzword. So more or less, we have looked at augmented reality in a large way and how to make sure that they are guided. Mainly, you don't have time to train them fully. So you have to only look at guiding the workforce to make sure the quality of picking the parts, doing the right process, and making sure the end of line quality. The automation comes predominantly when you look at a labor intensive activity on a vehicle assembly line and all, where automation per se, when you have a large customization, it is difficult. Economics may not work out, but then you make sure that the end product quality or the end product aggregate or the end product sub-assembly is validated within the process. And that is where all the techniques of automation gets into usage, the traditional automation per se and the data acquisition part. And now when you talk about data connectivity between equipments. So on a completely, I would say that lines are like 23, 27 stages of a main assembly line, where each stage when the component reaches there, the history in the previous stage should cut in, and that data visibility should be there to ensure that the next process gets corrected if there is a mistake. So sort of we have quality gate systems wherein we actually look at automation technologies to ensure that no defect pass through the gates. So my whatever we have done so far in the plans is integrating these quality gates, making sure there is a complete visibility across all the stages, and ensuring that a zero defect tractor comes out. That's how we have looked at automation in quality, more or less onto guided system.
Okay. Thank you, Sanjeev. Next to Sham. Sham, some perspective on what I know your core area of business is into, inspection, which is directly impacting quality. So some thoughts around what have you seen adopted, and what could be some wish that you would want a good end user to look at when they adopted some guidance. Some thoughts around that would be interesting for everybody.
Sure. We started this machine vision, offering machine vision solutions as an inspection automation thing to manufacturing companies since 2007. When we started out, what started out is why people want to automate the inspection process. So one of the biggest thing many manufacturers face today is in the visual inspection processes, especially where you have deployed manpower to validate components for visual defects. We have a lot of subjectivity that kicks in, and you can never do a proper judgment of what is good and what is not good. So there we have a huge role to play in order to bring in science to define what is the visual defect that is acceptable and what is not acceptable. So that is where we started off. So initially, so we had systems that was very few, which needed inspection, like very few numbers per minute. To now, it has been scaling up to several thousand parts per minute. So definitely the speed of production is driving the necessity requirement for automation in quality. So earlier when we were talking about beverages lines, we had bottles running at 120 bottles per minute. Now we are thinking of 600 bottles per minute. So you blink an eye and several bottles have gone. And humanly it is impossible to catch up with such high speeds of manufacturing. So that is where the need for automation in quality is becoming much and more need. And also the other thing what we see is, especially with respect to the tier 2 and tier 3 manufacturers, earlier they were able to get away, or even if they were able to supply defective components to their end customers, since their end customers were manufacturing lines were not fully automated, they could still get away with few defective components reaching them. But now the contractual obligations have becoming more and more stringent. So the component manufacturers can no longer afford to supply defective components to their customers. So the need for 100% inspection has slowly becoming a rule and a need nowadays, and you cannot no longer rely upon your statistical methods of validating the lots. So this need is also, so we have been seeing a lot of requests of 100% inspection of components that is coming up for the automation. So this is what we have been catering to most of these automotive and food and pharma companies, to also beverages companies, to automate their inspection processes. Now, from the customer perspective, what I would want them to think is most of the time people have not done their homework with respect to what is their cost to an inspection process. Many times I've asked this question to most of my customers: what is the cost, what is the money you're spending for the inspection process? I don't see a positive, or I don't see a clear-cut number that they have worked upon. Why I'm telling this is, many people shy away from implementing an automated inspection system, which will benefit them a lot in many ways. It is not just that you're removing the defective components from the line, but the data that these visual inspection systems can throw back to them is far more valuable in terms of improving their productivity, improving their quality, and improving the overall efficiency of the line. So these are things what I would expect my customers to look at seriously, and then come out with a proper analysis of what's happening on the shop floor.
Thanks, thanks, Shyam. Thanks, JB. How do you see quality from you do assembly lines? What is the and you're doing now in in the e-commerce and the warehousing space? What is the lens of quality, and especially lens of automation and quality you see from an angle of a complete line, or whatever you look at an aggregate level? If you can share some perspectives and your wish list on how would you like a user to look at things so that they can take more effective decisions in terms of investments in Industry 4.0 in this context of automation and quality?
Good question, Uma. So what we've been seeing, right, and I'm going to give some catastrophic examples just to make points, but we're seeing some three fundamental drivers in the industry that are forcing people to look at automating the process of quality. All right, like Sanjeev spoke about. I mean, there's a lot of legacy in the way discrete manufacturing industry had handled in process gauges and end of line testing. So already approaches in place. But I think there are three fundamental drivers that are driving people to take a look at how to automate the quality. All right, the quality framework itself, right? So I think the first driver, in my opinion, is, see, when you say quality, you're trying to measure some attributes of your product. All right, I think what attribute of the product is important itself is changing. All right, I mean, if you rewind a few decades ago, as long as the product worked when it came out of the assembly line, it was enough. That was good quality product. I mean, that's all they wanted, right? The product should work. 0 kilometer failure should not happen, right? And then, it went on to saying you should be able to conduct the right number of tests. So you can stick a sticker that says tested okay. All right. If that was done, if the product came out with a sticker that said tested okay, quality is done. All right. Today, I think the nuances with which the attributes of products are being measured, right? And also the complexity of the supply chain. I mean, who manufactures what, who assembles stuff together, how does it get to the end customer, how does it get to the OEM, how does it get to the end user? So I think the attributes are getting more nuanced. And the moment you have more nuances in the way you want to measure quality, there is no way but to automate it. I think that's one aspect of one driver of bringing automation to quality. The second driver is going back to mass customization, flexibility, batch size of one. These attributes themselves are time variant. So every product that shows up at a particular cell could have a different set of attributes that are important for that product. All right. Just because this particular car, I mean, if you go to an automotive line, this car could have been manufactured to a different color. So you have to check a different color, right? That color is an attribute. That could be the sports variant of the car, which means the suspension system's characteristics are different. So the concept of batch size of one or mass customization is making these attributes itself, kind of be generated in real time and contextual. And there's no way you're going to be able to train an operator to say, look, if a red color car comes, check for this. If a blue color car comes, check for that. Right? I mean, you have to automate that, right? And the third and most important factor is, because what is traditionally called supply chain, it was called a chain for a reason, right? It was a straight line. Somebody made it. One company took it out in a truck. He took it to one distributor, who took it to one dealer, and it came to your house. Hence, it was called a chain. Today, that supply chain is becoming a supply network. All right. I mean, at every point in this network, there are multiple options, right? With this, there is tremendous requirement for transparency, in quality, right? So what that now means is, I mean, different industries have christened different words for transparency. I mean, the pharma industry calls it, something else. The automotive industry calls it trace and track. There are different ways, different lexicons, but fundamentally, the supply chain expects transparency. I should hypothetically be able to go double click on, something, scan a QR code on something, and I should be able to see, the horoscope of that product or the resume of that product up to that point in the supply chain, right? So, nuanced attributes, dynamic nature of the attributes of quality themselves, and transparency in the way quality is expected to be perceived in the supply network, right? I think is what is driving automation, is driving people to look at automation, right? The moment you say, I want to automate, is where, the technology aspects of it come in. What would have happened otherwise? Do I use vision? Do I use learning? I think that's the second layer. But first of all, people should realize that this is the reason why you have to automate. And I think Shyam made a very, very important point, right? I mean, the first tenet of quality is what, if you can't measure something, you can't improve something. All right. Now, the moment you have to automate a particular inspection process, you have to justify that investment. And if any investment, in my opinion, should make the cost per piece lesser than what it was before, the quality engineers themselves don't know what the quality of the current cost of the current quality processes are, right? So I think if there is one ask that I have of the industry, especially from the standpoint of exploring automation in the quality processes, please start developing frameworks for how do you assess your cost of quality, right? And once you know what your cost of quality is, then assessing the economics, either an NPV study or an ROI study on any automation investment starts becoming meaningful. So I think that's my answer to the second half of the question, Uma.
Thanks, JB. Thanks. I think takeaways from all of the things, and one of the things I'm pleasantly happy to see. I'm sure this is recorded. It will go on a link later, and we can hear it again. We get is a thread and some commonalities which is coming about. Why adaptability, why visibility. Therefore, I know even if we talk quality, we are actually talking about productivity because you are incoming. So we understand all of these, and we have follow-on sessions on productivity and all that as part of AI series going ahead. I'm sure there'll be a lot of learnings collectively from that. But I think the wish list is good, and I think the takeaway is, I think one is looking at cost of quality, and I haven't asked for the panelists being there today. So we'll try and see if we can take one action item from this as part of the forum of AIA to see, can we create working with users and providers to kind of make a playbook for how do you do cost of quality. And if some of you can join to be part of the task force, it would actually be good. So one of the things for us is to see that we can, we spoke about visibility and informed decision making as part of Industry 4.1. I think we should walk the talk. So in a webinar, if it becomes visible, this is the need of the industry, and we take informed decision and act on it, so that we can say that through this forum, we also created an impact in the, because when I remember when I spoke to there's a webinar fatigue all over the world and all over in India, but if we can get some outcomes that we can act on, and I think I don't want to publicly ask you to commit on a time, but a gentle request that we'll follow on some time with seeing if we can do something nice about finding how cost of quality can be, done. So great. I think we are good, doing good with time also. So I think now, given that there was one ask, I think when we spoke to a lot of people about it, why quality and automation? So I want to set a small trigger for a poll and have the moderator do that so that all the attendees are able to respond to that. And over to the poll question. Does it come visible? Yeah. So this is controversial, but still think many people say, look, when they make investment in quality, they many people say, no, for compliance and audit, I need to put some system. So give me some system. Some people and users say, I want for process improvement. And caveat here is, Sanjeev, this doesn't include TAFE because you told us how you do it. But this seemed to be a common thing. So the poll is on. If everybody can, including the panelists, can, it's open to the panelists also. If you can just respond to the poll while we set to move on to the next one. I just want to give a couple of minutes for that. And so question, we'll take that a little later about automating quality. Thanks, Nikunj, for the question. We will try and see how to address it at the. We'll try and see how we can get the poll results out. But if we can, all of you can just ensure you've responded to the poll, it'll be good. Yeah. So we while that is on, I'm just going to move to the next part of the thing. So one of the things I think we covered it in this session. I mean, this last thread of conversations itself. But I want to see if we can delve a little deeper into it. Quality is tightly linked to supply chain. Like what JB brought out by saying, look, it's a network. He spoke at the supplier dealer network, but it also goes at the tier 1, tier 2. The supplying on the raw material side. So how do you see the impact of quality in a supply chain? And given that we are looking at mass customization and all of this, which means the need for the material to be right at the right time at the right place, is going to be even more dynamic and becomes imperative. So Sanjeev, over to you on how do you see impact of quality, in supply chain as it was earlier, and because of all these changes, what do you see the push or the nudge, or what becomes imperative in that angle that might not be a choice today, but was a choice earlier, or something around that realm? What are your thoughts on that? Sanjeev, you need to unmute.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No problem.
It's a very deep question. That's what I was saying, because it's a very loaded question. Because supply chain is something which is, of course, it needs to be predictable, but there are a lot of variability there. And the key challenge, which what we have seen is, how do we imbibe our organization quality DNA into the supply chain? Because earlier that was not a big challenge, because there was some flexibility in that. Now there is a no compromise deal on that. Whichever supply chain, the complete network needs to follow the organizational quality DNA. That is the biggest challenge. Now, how do we do it is the next question. So, because each supply chain, whether it be tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, they have their own organization dynamics, the infrastructure, the DNA per se, And that transformation, how do we push that? So that is where I'm seeing automation playing a definite role in how do I connect with these suppliers to ensure that whatever DNA I require from them comes out.
Okay.
So that level of transparency needs to be set in the system so that when a batch or whatever hits the plant, we are dead sure that that is what we want.
Okay.
We talk about self-certification and things like that. To a large extent, it is okay, right? But what is the next level? So that, let us say, entire supply chain moves to a self-certification stage. Now, how do I do it? That's the biggest challenge, especially when your variability, as you mentioned, each day the Heijunka patterns are different, and how do the supplier adapt to that Heijunka? How do they adapt to that flexibility? The last minute, the last mile, as they call in logistics, the last mile here. How do they adapt to that? That I would say is the biggest challenge, and maybe we are looking at solutions actually for that last mile. How do I get there to ensure that the DNA is met?
Thanks. Thanks, Sajeev. I certainly didn't intend it to be a loaded question, but it's a reality, and so I'm sure once we all discuss it more, it will come, because it is, we believe, and these are all come by interacting with people and asking. So thanks for sharing your thing. And Shyam, some thoughts around
Yeah, the impact of quality on the supply chain is that when you have the right quality systems in place, obviously you'll be making, or you'll be manufacturing fewer and fewer defective components or defective products. So when the products have to move across the supply chain, it is obviously, when you are making fewer and fewer defective components, that means to say there's a huge impact on the replenishment levels that you maintain across the different assembly processes. So the buffer that you keep comes down. The buffer for intermediate requirements definitely comes down, and cost of moving the goods across the supply chain definitely comes down. And so that's the major takeaway for the manufacturers, that you will have optimized inventory levels across your supply chain when you have a right kind of quality systems that have been implemented in place. I think that is what I see the impact of quality on the supply chain.
Thanks, Shyam. Thanks. So what you're saying is one additional insight, saying it has a material impact. You're talking about inventory levels holding being changing,
Correct.
because the quality being high, because we always thought with defects, we never associated with just the inventory level. Thanks. JP, how do you see this impact of quality in supply chain, and any of the lines, or we're talking at an aggregated level? If you see, what do you see as the red alerts or flags there, and what seems to be easing because of Industry 4.0 to do some of those? I think just some perspectives on that.
Yeah, I don't think things are yet easy, because we are all just scratching the surface of the primary red alert, right? See, I think what's important for all of us to acknowledge is, see, what is the reason? What is the purpose of existence of the supply chain?
JP, can I think your voice is soft. Can you?
Oh, really? My voice is soft.
No, it was okay earlier, I think.
That is the first sign
Okay,
of
go ahead.
Pralaya, by the way. So what I'm saying is it better now, Uma?
Yeah, it is.
Perfect. So what I'm saying is, we need to first understand what is the primary purpose of existence of the supply chain, right? The primary purpose of existence of the supply chain is because some consumer wanted to buy something. All right. So the consumer, meeting a consumer's demand, is the purpose of existence of the supply chain. The red alert for all of us is today, thanks to certain key transformations that the world has gone through, that consumer has way more access to data than we ever imagined. All right. I mean, you can take the chassis number of a car, and it was a privilege to be able to find out what that data about that car. Today, you can go run a Google search and you'll find out when the car was made, who made it, which batch, which lot, which plant. right? And that's just the beginning. I mean, every product has a QR code. Consumers can go, scan that. So I think what is important for all of us to accept is the purpose of existence of the supply chain, the consumer's demand. That consumer has way more access to data than we at some point thought he would have or she would have, and today are comfortable that they have that access to that data. And so that's the new paradigm for us, right? So with this, I think the paradigm of how to measure quality at any one point in the supply chain, may it be a manufacturer, may it be a retailer, is changing. All right. I mean, first pass yield used to be FPY, right? FTY used to be one measure of quality. I was 99% means I was doing well, right? Then that became PPM. It became parts per million. And then people found out that parts per million also is a dangerous metric. I mean, a company like Flipkart may be shipping out 1 billion packages a year. I mean, even if they have 1 ppm, they're having 1,000 defects in a year, correct? So ppm stopped becoming irrelevant. Then it became the ZDM, the zero defect mentality, right? I think Sanjeev spoke about that at length. Now it has gone beyond that. So I know companies that track social media posts per year as their measure of quality. Like, how many times in a year did my company get bashed on Twitter as the primary metric of quality, not like the secondary or tertiary, right? Because that is the purpose of existence, right? And so that, how do I now flow that back into, what insights can I get from my entire manufacturing and supply chain to figure out what are the excess that cost that one why? What do I go back? I think that's where Industry 4.0 has a lot of role to play. All right. How can I enable this data? How can I enable this interaction of various moving parts in the supply chain? How do I make this real time, right? So I think from a containing the impact aspect, right? I think there are three vectors that the entire supply chain will start working on, and we're already seeing that happen, right? Manufacturers will strive to make zero defect. I mean, not 1 ppm, not 0.1 ppm, not 1.01 ppm, 0 ppm, right? So that strive will be on all the time. They will leverage a set of key technologies, a set of enabling technologies like Industry 4.0 to achieve that. While that is going on, the supply chain by itself will try to become more and more transparent, right? Because this is like, if imagine the supply chain to be multiple stations in an assembly line, hypothetically speaking, right? You would always, and I'm sure Sanjeev sir would know this, intimately, you would always have compensatory processes, right? You would be able to accept the slack produced the first three processes in the fourth process, right? You can do that only if you have transparency, right? I mean, you would do shims to compensate for some tolerance backup, very mechanically speaking, right? So if you not look at the supply chain as an aggregate of 20 different processes, and you start sharing data, at some point you get to look, this is a compensator for me, right? You can build buffers. So I think there has to be a strive towards creating transparency. And the third and most important thing is the supply chain will start engaging with end consumers, all right? And we will see data flow back, this closed loop control happening at data that is just not production data, but also consumer data. I think these are the three vectors around which people will kind of start reinventing and reimagining themselves to deal with the impact of quality in the supply chain.
Thanks, JB. I think the sense that you are doing assembly lines and warehousing, I think you're able to vectorize it in a way of bringing quality in a very, very, consumer to think. It helps. It gives another lens to look at how the aggregated ones. Thank you for that sharing. So we move to the next piece of this. When we speak supply chain, I think we are always talking about material. So. But I think one of the biggest part of supply chain in manufacturing is people. People and operators on shop floor. So given the subject is supply chain and impact on quality, I mean, on shop floor side, look at it. You want to look at what is the effect or impact of manpower availability, manpower or women power, I mean, people who work on the shop floor, impact of it on quality, okay? Because the lens is quality, we still want to talk about quality. And I think it's sort of amplified impact of this because of COVID. So we are seeing an exaggerated view of it currently now because of labor, migrant, all of those economical, political ramifications of pandemic is one part. But I'm sure these were there earlier also, but it's sort of zoomed in to look at it in a much bigger way. So what is the impact of people, manpower on quality in this, from perspective both of quality and availability? I want it to be a free flow. I'm just setting the tone for the area to dialogue around. So Sanjeev, you've also done across the globe, put up plants. So some perspectives on that which you can share and gets us know from people on shop and the.
Okay. Uh, Especially on an assembly line of a vehicle demography, assembly demography, where I would say 50% manual intervention and 50% automation. The manual element plays a vital role. And the scenarios like how do I engage them from the day of inception on the assembly line to make sure that the product quality or the process quality is ensured. That is the biggest challenge. So how do I train him and ensure that my quality comes right and my productivity also comes right? So in view of that fact, basically, how do I transcend the skill matrix in the shortest period of time? So that becomes the primary focus, maybe for any assembly lines. So there, across the globe, wherever put up the plants, basically that was the biggest challenge to get the right people on board and the response to the need of the production, how fast I can put them on the line. A lot of techniques and trainings are in place. The conventional, traditional method, when you look at putting them on a like a new product line and putting them through a dexterity skills, the torquing skills, the vision skills. So many things are there whereby we are rest assured. Then you put the line, put the people there, they'll be on board. But when you look at a volatile manpower, no more. We look at the fixed cost is always a challenge to address. So we look at volatile labor and how do I engage them in the right manner. So these are the areas where every company, I would say, that would be facing challenges, and especially amplified because of the pandemic. But right now, the pandemic is no longer an excuse. You need to produce with the available manpower. So that's sort of a mandate now. I don't think anybody can talk about the pandemic as an excuse at the moment. So how do I gear up with the available manpower? So whatever steps we have taken so far is in terms of making an aggressive move in doing training programs. And I would say that to a large extent, we have done certain softwares especially in very, very skilled areas like painting, because we need to validate whether the guy who paints, because that represents the vehicle outcome, the skin panel. End of the day, that is what the customer perception is all about. I'm not saying that the aggregate level technologies, that's more or less, I said that 50% of manual and 50% of automation layer. But the customer perception points, the touch points of the customer perception, those are very, very primary importance. And that is where we look at how do I validate a guy on a painting line? So what are the skill sets he needs to have? So these are the areas where we sort of plugged, and we have had excellent results. And right now, I can really validate the skill matrix of that person before he touches the product or touches the process. So that's one part of it. And the volatility you manage, it's a sheer operational excellence. How do you manage the volatile labor? How do I make sure? So to a large extent, we have got skill matrix integrated into the critical to quality processes, and we ensure that those people hit the line only at that particular, the deployment happens based on a skill matrix. So these are a couple of areas which we have really looked at, especially in this period. One is to enhance the productivity right from day one, and to ensure that the quality is the derivative of that.
Thanks, thanks, Sanjeev.
It's from a hands-on what I'm talking. I've not touched the technology part, but this is what is happening
No,
on
that's
the.
fine. That's fine. It gives and what you're saying is there's no excuse. Like people have to deliver, which means you have to find whatever it takes to deliver, and that means
Yes,
that it's
the market
upskilling.
has opened up, and there are no excuses now. We need to deliver.
That's one good phrase we are using, that market is
Yes.
opening up despite media covering things, including today World Bank saying India is regressive. So I'm happy to hear. I'm sure all the audience are also happy with that thing. So Shyam, from from your lens of what you're doing, is it are you seeing a shift in the way, whatever you're doing in vision is getting adopted different because of this? Is there any impact that you're seeing in terms of skilled people availability and a linkage to adoption of technology? Or is there any connections across drivers that you're sensing?
Oh yes, when we compare the scenario before the pandemic struck and what we are seeing now, I think there's been a considerable shift in the way our customers are thinking. There's definitely a lot more openness to adopt machine vision solutions for the inspection process. We have been seeing earlier where the projects were kept on hold. People have come back and said, how do we go about doing this now? How do you make it faster? How do we make it more quicker to eliminate these kind of interventions by human force in a certain inspection processes? So there's been a definite shift in the way the companies are thinking to adopting new technologies for automating the quality inspection process. So now we are not only working on machine vision, we are also working on gauging systems, automated gauging systems, automated integration of other measurement systems like 3D profile sensors for the measurements, and integrating LVDTs and various technologies. Now they are all coming together for automating the inspection process. I definitely see a big shift in the way the customers are approaching towards this automation of this quality processes. So that I definitely see. Yeah.
Thanks, Shyam. Thanks. So JP, kind of sort of wrap around this thing on manpower and effect of manpower's availability. What is do you see a shift, or do you see over the years you have seen adoption of flexible automation line? There's always been a need, and I think we spoke in the first part of the session that the flexibility need is going to be more. Do you see compulsions on automating the lack of manpower? I'm just giving some nudges around some threads. What do you sense in that area that can help the collective learning of what's happening in the market, and how do we sort of make this meaningful?
So I think, in the context of manpower and its effect on quality, I'm going to stop using the word automation and start using the word process. All right. And the elephant in the room with respect to manpower is the pandemic. So we cannot avoid talking about the pandemic. So I think I would like to look at life just like BC and AD, pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. All right. So let's understand what the macro trend was pre-pandemic, right? So I think over the last maybe 5 years, especially since everybody got a smartphone and internet became cheap, right? I think a big socio-economic trend that we've been seeing in the country is people.
If you move closer to the computer, it will be a little.
Sorry. Yeah. Okay. A big socio-economic trend that we've been seeing in the country is people across skill levels being able to discover jobs. All right. I mean, being able to find a job was a privilege of which club you belong to at some point of time. All right. Now, I mean, as long as you have, Geo on your phone, you are able to now find a job. I mean, the gig economy has kicked in, right? I mean, to be a taxi driver in Bangalore at some point of time, you needed to know which road took you where. I mean, today, as long as you know how to drive, you can become a taxi driver in any city in India, correct? So what is a transferable skill? What is a non-transferable skill is all changing dramatically right now. All right. So I think, and in general, as societies start becoming more and more developed, one thing that is known to grow is the amount of leisure time people have in a day. So the whole working force in India has now reached a point where people, independent of what your skills levels are, can find 8 hours to be employed. All right, and I don't have to worry about it. I can go home, and if this guy is not keeping you happy, you can go find another job somewhere else, right? We treat that, as employers. I mean, my company employs people, obviously, and then we blame it on the millennials don't have job loyalty and all that kind of stuff. But I think this is the reality: is people can find jobs easily. All right. Uh, so I think the way the industry has to deal with this, and this is all pre-pandemic. I'll come to the pandemic, post-pandemic in a minute. Is I think one of our biggest cultural weaknesses is a complete lack of belief in processes. All right. So we believe that processes don't produce results, people produce results. And then we focus on the wrong side of the problem, which is, oh my God, I don't have the right kind of people. I mean, there is a very popular ice cream parlor chain in Bangalore that me and my kids patronize. And, it hit me in the face last year when I went and ordered some strawberry sundae or something. And the guy gave me a strawberry sundae with one strawberry on the top, right? And then I jokingly asked him, what is this, man? This is strawberry sundae. It has one strawberry. He said, hold on, sir. He picked out a flow chart from underneath. All right. There is a flow chart that the company has prepared on how to make a strawberry sundae. All right. That strawberry sundae flow chart says put one cut strawberry on the top. He said, sir, I put. So now what this company has ensured is as long as somebody is pleasant enough to interact with the customer, can actually produce strawberry sundaes, right? So the belief in the process, I think, is the fundamental weapon to deal with lack of churn in people. All right. Automation is just a way of implementing a process. I don't think automation necessarily needs to mean that I will replace a human being. All right. Like automatically presenting a work instruction to an operator is still automation, correct? So it need not mean you're replacing the person. But I think what is important for us to realize as a society, as a culture, is we need to start believing in processes. When you do that, right, you will start becoming less and less like, Mr. Sanjeev spoke about how they have a skill matrix. They take a job, they break it down into skills, and they're able to assess the person before he gets in the job. That's the process, right? The worst that can happen is you have to tweak the skill matrix, right? You realize that there is an additional skill that is important, and the next quarter you improve that and you carry on, right? So I think for us to be able to deal with the way, so people will be tough to find. The corona has nothing to do with it, all right? People are always tough to find. I mean, this time last year, everybody is crying about lack of people, correct? It's not like, the corona made the people vanish from somewhere, right? So I think the silver bullet, the Occam's razor for dealing with this churn in people is belief in processes. And Industry 4.0, automation are all various ways of making that process deployable easily, seamlessly, quickly, fast, all the other stuff, right? I think one definite shift we will see post-corona is I would not say rapid, but definitely a de-urbanization. We will start seeing people leave urban centers and go remote. All right, people will go back to their hometowns because I come from a manufacturing background. I couldn't believe that we would have Zoom meetings to actually conduct our business, right? So people now, I think, will wake up. There will be more and more aspects of jobs that will happen remotely. Whether it is because somebody sitting in rural India or somebody sitting at home doesn't make a difference. So we will have to start imagining how manufacturing activities can be done by remote people, right? For example, how do I do a changeover in an induction molding machine by the mold specialist being remote, right? How is the process parameters going to be set remote? How am I going to change the CNC program by being remote, right? So I think this is going to be one of the effects of the pandemic. People will come back. I mean, everybody have to figure out how to work to earn a living, right? And then, put food, provide for all their family. So I think people will come back. But a shift that we will all see is there will be a certain aspect of people's jobs that will become remote. So I think all of us as technology providers in the automation universe will have to keep our eyes and ears open for opportunities that allow companies to begin operating remotely. So that to me, I think, is an effect of the pandemic from a people availability standpoint.
Thanks, JB. That's a completely different dimension you brought to the discussion. So I think we sort of wrapped around the basic theme questions. So I think it's time we have a look at the first poll responses, what came in before we get into the thing. So it says compliance and audit is 29 and process improvement is 89. There's a small caveat because the multiple options were also there. There is a subset to it. So a part of compliance audit would have repeated in both. So thanks for sharing this. I do not know if the responses were also made very politically correct, because when we met in the market, we had a sample set which gave different, but this gives us more positive tone to the whole thing. So thank you all. And so we have one more ask. So we are going to the second poll now, and over to Harish. Can you set the second poll in? Yeah, so you have a multiple choice. What is driving? So if you're a user, you can say, but if you're, you deliver, if what you sense from the market, you can put it. It's just for us to combine and get a sense of this. What is driving predominantly the automation? Is it availability, skills, labor, therefore automation, or material handling? So you're getting into it, or quality process. That's what we are calling methods, or something like adopting new because you want to stay ahead of the curve. So you're experimenting on something. So can we have this, and the panelists can also respond on this. So we are going to go into the last leg of it. Um, Sanjeev was unwell, and he volunteered to stay at it. I seem to have locked, either it's internet issue or he must have felt uncomfortable, but we will sort of.
Sanjeev is back. I can see Sanjeev.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Sorry, Sanjeev. I just saw you off and I texted. I thought since you were
No.
unwell and we were talking pre-COVID, post-COVID, so I was a little worried. Thanks. So if we can, we just finished the poll and the second one, and we'll probably see the results a few minutes later. So I want to move to a slightly more. There's one question which is on manufacturing in textile. So it's a quality audit in apparel manufacturing. Since I know the background of the audience, I mean, the panelists here, we don't have anybody from the background. So on behalf of AIA, we'll make sure the question is taken up, and we'll find some answers from right people, or whatever pointers we can get from public domain, and share it, Nikunj. If there are any other questions, kindly put it either on the chat or the QA, and we'll sort of see that while we move to the next leg. So one of the things we realize is, for us, it's all about technology, shop floor, this, but our day begins with opening a computer and seeing the screen all the time. And the equivalent of that is what an operator does in front of the machine all the time. I mean, if you put an empathetic view, they come in the morning, they do the same or different operations, and they are fixed with one or two screens or whatever they see. So I want to know any moments in the shop floor, either when you are implementing or as a user, that caught your attention, either for the humor or the, sometimes you think very complex thing, there's a simple solution to it, something which amazes you or curious, some anecdote. So I mean, one, if anybody in the panelists can volunteer first to start, otherwise I go by order. Anything which you feel is a point to remember or stayed with you. I think these are, you want to make sure shop floor and production is also a little fun and humor. So any moments to share that? I'll start with JB on the top and then move to the either shop floor or when we install, whatever it is, some anecdotal thing and learnings. Maybe to you, you're unmute.
Sorry about that. Your first poll question, why do you invest in quality and automation? That reminded me of an experience that I had many moons ago, obviously. And I mean, this was the customer who turned out to become a good friend, mentor for my life. But I mean, this was many moons ago when he was drawing out the specifications of an end-of-line testing machine for a product. And it's supposed to be a high-speed line producing parts rate of 400-500 every hour, a bunch of parameters, all kinds. So we're like going through what are the parameters, what should be their accuracies, what's the CP/CPK you want to establish, etc., etc. And then finally said, JB, after all this, I have one final request for you. There should be a mode of the machine called the audit mode. And when you hit that audit mode, when an auditor is in front of the line, the machine should show that all my parts are passing and they should be within 3 sigma of the. So, I mean, when you asked that question, I was reminded of that anecdotal, from 10, 15 years ago. But I think quality is coming of age in our country, right? I think in a retail context, right? India, for example, is known to have the most tolerant consumers. All right. I mean, if you track a missed customer interaction event at a retail establishment, we have the highest point of re-engaging with that establishment from a percentage standpoint. I think that's changing. I mean, we are becoming very discerning consumers, as consumers, right? We're becoming very discerning. We have many more options. So I think the quality driving by, and I keep telling this to all my customers, right? Don't invest because you want to increase productivity. Don't invest because you want to reduce manpower. You invest because you want to improve quality of the production. All other pleasant byproducts will happen automatically. I mean, by itself, you will use lesser people, your productivity levels will go up, you will make smaller machines, right? But the primary premise of automating a process should be to increase quality. And I think that will happen.
Thanks, thanks, JB and Shyam.
Okay. Something I recollect that happened very recently. One of our customers, who's manufacturing these caps and supplying to beverage industries, they wanted us to implement visual inspection system, and this was a project that they were working on from almost 4 years. They couldn't find a right solution for it, and incidentally, we happened to bump into this customer, and we worked a nice algorithm for inspecting those components. And after we implemented, we gave the trial run, and after 3 days, when our engineer visited the plant, the production team had conveniently switched off the system, and they were running the production line. So my engineer asked the supervisor, "Why is that you have switched off the inspection system?" He says the defects have increased. So the defects have increased, and the production has come down. So we have stopped it. This is the normal thing that we encounter after we implement every system. It's not that the defects increases. It's just that the system is more accurate in identifying the defects and pulling them out of the system. So then later on, we had a tough time proving them, and then we went up on having a joint exercise, and later on we helped them to optimize the speed of the production, and wherein they were able to find the right balance between in producing the good components versus producing the less defects. I think this is something which we encounter every day in every project. Defects increasing all of a sudden.
I can relate to it. We have had times when many years back, I think more than 14, 15 years back, OE was just being, measured, and they had OE like 92, 93, and when you put a system and it showed some 48 or something, it's like standing on the weighing scale. We say, no, I think the weighing scale is a problem. We all do that at personal life. So this was like, no, I think the system is wrong, and it takes some time it's like post-pandemic, then you realize your new normal for OE is only 42 or 43, and you need to improve on it. So Sanjeev?
When Shyam was talking about his thing, something struck me very long back when I was setting up an equipment, and the outcome, I was asking the operator to start measuring. So I was measuring and he was giving me the component. Suddenly I found that everything was hunky-dory. My CPK was fantastic. I started having doubts. Then I asked him where you are taking the component. He was giving me the same component. he was thinking that it was again a contractual guy, so he thought that he has to give me the same component. It was a huge mission, so I couldn't see from where he was picking the component. I was really flabbergasted. So, have I created something really great within such a short span? So, it was a hilarious moment.
Temporary euphoria over an accomplishment. It should have been. Thank you all for sharing. Sharing. I think this is reality. I'm sure everybody has something, and that's one of the challenges also when we want more transparency and we want more visibility through Industry 4.0. One of that is, I feel, if we can provide a safety net for people, saying when all things become visible, what happens is, and if the organization is told they won't be attacked, the people won't be prosecuted for something, and give them a safe zone for some time, then they might want to use that as an aid to progress themselves. That's probably one way of doing. And in a way, it sets context to the thing that it's ultimately a people thing. Even how much ever we set processes and all of that, it's dependent on how you can have people relate to what is getting done, and make them look at it from slightly different lenses, I think, which will set the thing. So I think we might have the results for the poll too, and we'll see. Okay, so labor is 48%, material is 7, methods, quality, process is 59, and adopting new technology staying ahead of the curve is, I think, I don't know, the highest comes in red color, I think. So I guess this gives some lens. Our sample is about, we are close to 46 people who are in the session, so gives a profile of this. But I think one of the things we just spoke that in a morning session I shared, I picked this word from one of the forums in the US. I think McKinsey used it or something. Pilot purgatory, saying there's excessive pilots being done and no real implementation going on. I'm not sure whether adopting new technology, staying ahead of curve is come from a lens of people, just experimenting to do something, or it's live actual investments to doing. But I think we are coming to the last leg of the session, and thanks to all of you for responding on the poll. Is there any question that among panelists you want to ask? Sanjeev being a user there and all of us being on the other side, is there something any of the panelists want to ask from the user side? Or Sanjeev, you have something that you want to ask?
Yes.
Like if you have a wish list, let me trigger that. I think we have a few minutes. Sanjeev, what would be your wish list for people who are serving the manufacturing segment? Like JB is part of one business in that, Sham is part, I'm part of another, and so are some of the audiences who are there, I'm sure. If you had a wish list of saying, doesn't matter what they are doing, okay, not areas. I believe today we need partners or vendors. I would want to use the word partners more than vendors, because it gives a sort of skin in the game. What would those wish lists be if you had you've been many years, dealt with a lot of people, so some thoughts around what could be a wish list, saying a good supplier or partner today in this economy doing this should have, let's say, 2-3 attributes. What would they be?
Okay. See, basically from this side of the table, when I look at it, I would like to have, again, I would say engagement partners who can give us the best-in-class technologies. When I say best-in-class, because we within our boundary conditions are limited. We won't be able to see outside the box. So a person, see, more or less, most of the engagement partners come and push for their solution. They don't look at what the customer actually needs. It's basically they frame around what solution they already have, right? So, and mainly, I don't think any industry would have embraced the whole thing under a single product or a single platform. That is not possible. So you need to have platform solutions. which can talk to each other, and engagement partners who can help any industry in deriving a roadmap for them. Saying, hey, this is one bit solution which you can address immediately to get this result. JB pointed out, essentially, end of the day. And how do I get there? And how much is the time frame which you can bite immediately and chew later? So something which doesn't come in. Everybody comes in, says, I am doing Industry 4.0 and this is what the solution and this is what I can give you. And you have to tailor make your applications to their solution. That is what is happening. And from customer's perspective, the problem is always there is a scope creep. So we start with something and we end up somewhere. Shyam rightly pointed out, the RFQ preparation itself is a bit dicey. So an engagement partner who can help the customer to really spec the whole process and say that, look, you can do it only at this. Like, I would say it is whatever we talk in terms of automation industry 4.0, it's like crawl, walk, run.
And then fly.
The maturity level of each industry can be different. The absorption rate can be different. So the engagement partner should assess that. Understand, again, I'm talking about the DNA, whether an organization can take up this transformation, and if it is possible, in how many stages, how many years, how can I transform, as I earlier said, from visibility to an adaptability. That is what, from this side of the table, I would look at an engagement partner to be. And at the moment, I'm not seeing much of an integrated approach, because technology, if the software companies comes, they will talk about a solution framework and bringing in some hardware implementation partners. It doesn't work that way anymore. If it has to work, it has to be an integrated approach and a framework of many platforms converging. And I would say that the beginners or the startups can be a better, because as JB pointed out, no, ROI is more important. Most of the solutions in Industry 4.0 are for developed countries, not for developing countries. Correct me if I'm wrong. They come up with a very, very high-end solution, which definitely is not possible, especially in the current scenario, to absorb. So we should look at customer-friendly, investment-friendly, and with quick results and transformational results. That's what I would look for.
Thanks, Sanjeev. I guess one common thing we have is even pizzas which are sold abroad, when it comes here, has paneer and things to it. So even that, nothing global can be in the same bun, and I can relate.
I would say, think global, act local.
Thanks, Sanjeev. So a wish list from what we want users to. Sanjeev always said, I'm on this side of the table, and we always feel that side of the table is very, very powerful side of the table. So what is the wish list, JB and Shyam, each one of you can probably just take a couple of minutes each, and if you were to look at from a...
I can go first, right? So I think, and I like the way, Sanjeev spoke about engagement partnerships, right? See, I think one of the key tenets of automating anything, right, especially in a context like India, I mean, you did not know that if you put paneer on the pizza, it would sell, right? I mean, you are trying to come up with an Indian flavor of something that you know would work globally. For reasons ranging from cost to whether to trained operators, we will not be able to get the same thing and operate. Like the fastest car on Indian roads will not be the Bugatti Veyron. All right, you take a Bugatti Veyron and run it on Indian car roads, it's going to break down, right? Surprisingly, the fastest car on Indian roads may be a Mahindra Thar or something. We don't know, right? So I think this when you set out on these endeavors, the goal is clear, but the path to the goal is not clear, right? And I think that is where this partnership is super important. And I think it's like everything in a partnership, there are two sides to it. There are two parties to it. Hence, it's called a partnership, maybe more than two. And when one of my mentors always has told me that you are vendor and customer means you have a conflict of interest. One wants to buy at a lesser price, one wants to sell at a higher price. All right. The moment you convert this customer, supplier, buyer, seller relation to a partnership relation, you have a common goal. All right. Both of you have failed if you don't get to that goal. Both of you have succeeded if you get to that goal. So I think the responsibility of being able to structure these partnerships relies on both parties. All right. I think that's one definite ask I have, not just of people in the end user community, people in the industry at large. Behave like partners. People who are in the sell side of things have to lift themselves and say they are as responsible for success as the buyers are, and the buyers have to realize that they have to enable success, right? If the vendor fails, they have failed. So I think the one ask that I have from the industry is create the mentality, the mindset of partnership. And I think the second thing is, and I'd be happy to point, if anybody who's interested, to a very interesting article that I read many years ago, right? By this professor who was a professor of operations research, organizational theory, sorry, in Harvard Business School, who says, the real world definition of the word project is destined to fail. All right. That's the definition. Anything that is set up to fail is a project, because, the complex stakeholding patterns that exist, you always take up goals that are beyond what you think you're capable of achieving together, because only then have you pushed the needle on something. I mean, if you do not feel like you underperformed on some parameters of the project, you set yourself smaller than you should have goal. But the problem in this is the moment you have a buy-sell relationship, right? This becomes a measure of who succeeded, who failed. All right. So there should be maturity. I mean, again, going back to Sanjeev, what you said about an engagement partnership, right? There has to be a mature way in which we look at the goals that we are setting for ourselves, and then say, hey, as it's like somebody else spoke about weight loss, right? I mean, the weight loss industry has two very important characteristics about it, right? It's the one industry where people always underperform on goals, all right? But two, it also has the highest customer satisfaction, because before you actually signed up with Vandana Luthra, you never lost a kilo of weight, all right? She promised 8 kgs of weight loss, you lost 6 kgs. As an end user, you're so happy, right? That I never lost weight in my life, I lost 6 kilos. But Vandana Luthra has underperformed. No, she said 8 kgs, but you did only 6 kgs, right? So there has to be, you know what I mean, right? So,
Yep.
so I think in the spirit of this partnership, we should all figure out what is success, what is failure. Actually, these are two aspects that I wanted to bring about.
Thanks, JB. So we are in the very last leg. So Shyam, a quick 2-3 minutes around what is the wish list from your side?
Yeah, I mean, I sounded off at the very beginning. Is that what Sanjeev brought out and what JB also complemented is very much the need of the day, that we need to build partnerships in order to see a success, more and more success stories in the automation industry. And many a times it is always a complaint. I started out with a complaint telling that the RFQs are not very clear. They're not well defined. What is the objectives of implementing an automation system? I think when we bring in these partnerships together as a partner, as a solution provider and as an end user, when we join together and start working on what is the need, then I think the RFQs and everything would start falling in place, and there'll be a lot more clarity in what is to be implemented on the shop floor. Even Sanjeev was right that many a times an external force can bring in new ideas to the existing processes. So because we are, as an automation solution provider, we would have worked across different industry domains. We have implemented solutions across various industries. We are not stuck to one particular domain. So this cross domain expertise is what we bring onto the table, and that helps a customer a lot more than what he was actually looking for. And this we have seen in many cases, that when we engage with the customer as a partner, the customer, the end result is lot more superior than what they had initially conceived of. I totally agree with both the points, brought out by Sanjeev and JB.
Thanks, Shyam. Thanks, JB. Thanks, Sanjeev. I also believe, and I think one of the wish lists, and we've been at it for many years as partner. I think one wish and ask I believe is there is, I think we've been looking at partnership board for years, and we were contrarian in our own way, because many times customer wants to associate you with some MNC or some OEM for some. Now that is changing thanks to industry, because the need is more becoming, I don't want it centered around one, but there's a push sometimes we have seen that has come. So being far more objective and looking at the value prop rather than a large OEM backing, the choice of tools for the application more than the brand, I think helps in this journey. I think it's opening up thing. I think the second is ask is also mature ways of ensuring the complete organizational system which responds to such needs. The way one buys a cable and the way one buys a system is pretty different. Sometimes I think because of the organizational structures of procurement, many times some of these gets constrained. So I think that's not just a wish list here. I think overall, when we do this collaborative way of getting best of breeds, the way of approaching and how the organizations, I think will also start seeing a shift. And I think we seem to be very good on the time. We are at 4:29. So thanks to all of you for taking, thanks JB, and thanks Sanjeev, especially that you were down with a viral and made up. Thank you. Double thanks to you. Thanks
for the
Shyam.
opportunity.
A few minutes and then we will sign off. So thanks to all of you who attended this evening. The next one is going to be on, from AIA, is going to be on productivity and efficiency. And you should have a mail in the next fortnight about that date. It will be on a typical Thursday evening, 3 p.m. But which week, the week next or the next after we come. We're also looking at, and we would recommend all of you to connect with your communities and campaign this with your users. As you could see in this forum, we are making it very generic. There are no agendas of selling anything. So we want to make it like a think tank kind of an initiative so that some things can open up and overall the ecosystem can collaborate. So we would encourage all of you to do that. We have a quick chat. If all of you, I know there are, I think 37 or 36 online, including some of us here. If you can just put a quick 2 words on your takeaways on this session while we move to the last leg, it would help me read that out to the panelists for the time they have spent about if there are any suggestions that you would like to ask, if you can put, if I can see some quick chat comments on all of this, that it would help, because everybody is busy in COVID, like you said, whether labor is there or not, they are mandated to produce, and all of us are also putting time while the business is calling. So some some reciprocation of the time spent would help next time. If I call them again, I think they would be feeling, yeah, there were a lot of responses. So I'm doing some nudging around that. So can you all read? I'm just reading the list. Abhirat, Girish, Gopal, Hari, Harneet, Ibrahim, Jagdish. I can see a whole lot of you. If you can just quickly put a couple of words, I think it's our way of, I'm asking this on behalf of AIA, because I think we need to give back some few thoughts to the panelists for taking their time today. And that excludes me. I'm just talking about the invitees we called on behalf of AIA. On the questions front, I think there's one on quality, and Nikunj, as we said, we'll get back. The last is on, we're going to move to some videos and to just get a feel of FSM, which is the cyber physical unit put by, in collaboration with IIT Delhi and AIA. It's called Samarth Udyog Initiative. You can just watch that for 2 minutes, and then we can log off. Also over to the video. Yeah. Thanks to all of you. I think we have a few comments. I'm just going to read it out for benefit. Nice to hear some good perspectives. Thanks to the moderator. Thanks panel, informative, sharing their perceptions. Thanks a lot. Excellent, different viewpoints. Great initiative. Look forward to more. Great session. It would be great to form a council of experts for simple questions can be posted. I would request all of you to reply on, or we will send you an email saying you can post any questions over the email and we will take it. Thanks. It's a nice session. One aspect is missing is educating the stakeholders. You can add professionals as part of education. Glad to listen to expert. It was more natural explanation without any boring scripts, which made this session interesting. Very informative. Key takeaway was design processes and qualities. Everything else will fall. That gave a new insight. Thanks, all of you. Thank you once again, and we will be there soon. Thanks.
Thanks a lot, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so
very
much.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye.